Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94, back with another reaction video. Today, we finna react to when WWE went PG in 2008. Now, listen, I've already stated this before, but when WWE went PG in 2008, it wasn't bad in the beginning. I want to say, like I said, around late 2009, like when they started doing the celebrity GMs. When they started doing that gimmick, like when Shaq was the general manager of Raw, fucking Bob Baker was the general manager of Raw, fucking Flavor Flav was the goddamn general manager of Raw. When they was doing that gimmick, that's when the WWE started getting really bad. But outside of that, 2008 was still a golden year, bro. Still goated, bro. So much shit was going on around this time. So many goated rivalries and feuds and all that stuff. It was really good around this time, most definitely. But anyways, though, without further ado, let's get right into this.
WWE and pro wrestling in general have gone through many significant changes throughout the years. Wrestling has mostly been a family-friendly product that revolves around simple stories involving good and bad. WWF in particular seemed more cleaner, more acceptable, especially as time went on. It had the family-friendly thing on lockdown and in turn appealed to a worldwide audience. It obviously had to do with a bunch of things, bringing in Hulk Hogan from the NWA to become the next major star, and an impressive roster filled with iconic and colorful characters such as Randy Savage, Andre the Giant, Roddy Piper, Hart Foundation, Mr. Perfect, and Demolition. There was plenty of variety and a top-to-bottom roster that rivals many throughout history. As time went on, the formula was waning and fading, with Hulk Hogan taking a step away from the WWF. Things weren't as hot as they were in the mid-80s, an accomplishment that was always going to be hard to top. Ric Flair, Sid Justice came in to give a new and fresh perspective. Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon were slowly rising the ranks, but after the steroid scandal in 1992, WWF cleaned house and embarked on a new era, the New Generation. The New Generation era was a time which forced WWF to look towards their newer and younger stars, such as Bret Hart, The Undertaker, and Yokozuna. Hogan and Flair ended up in WCW. Savage was on commentary despite having an interest in returning to the squared circle, and a part of it was image. You can't have these righted-up giants of the 80s hold the title in a time where the company was under a lot of scrutiny. Bret Hart, to me, was the best WWF champion of the 90s. He prided himself on being the very best and an example to follow, even as character, but it's known that his first title reign happened because of the steroid scandal. It was well known. The New Generation era took a step forward, but 2 steps back. I don't know how it's possible to have the era seem more family-friendly than the Golden Era, but it seemed to feel that way with some very shallow and dumb gimmicks dominating the shows. Why the hell would a race car driver decide to become a wrestler? In ring, it was much better and offered some very different wrestling by the likes of Alundra Blaze, Bull Nakano, 1-2-3 Kid, who stands out as a highlight of this era in the first half of the Attitude Era. He's very unique at the time, but there was a women's division there. Stuff was a bit different. New Generation was when business wasn't great, ratings weren't up at all, and the industry in general was at a point where things were calm before the storm. WWF was too clean cut at this point and lacked an edge about it. They did seem to understand this by 1996 when WCW was starting to do much better and ECW was standing out as being essentially the Wild West of North American wrestling. Goldust and the heel version of Diesel seemed to represent more of that edgy Attitude Era. Stone Cold Steve Austin signing with the WWF opened things up and brought a character who was constantly pushing beyond the line with his persona and actions. Austin is a very talented wrestler, but the time he brought in that character, a time where the industry was changing, was perfect. I can't really imagine Stone Cold Steve Austin in 1994 WWF or 1995 WCW. It was at the right place at the right time. The Attitude Era came along with the success of ECW's edgy and often controversial product, but also the New World Order in WCW, a faction that reimagined pro wrestling and brought formulas that are still used to this very day. Eric Bischoff as the heel authority figure, which wasn't a foreign concept, but a very notable one that made it famous. All these elements brings WWF to a point where it was more grounded and less family-friendly. Even The Undertaker wasn't the same. What's funny is that the entire beginning of the Attitude Era was PG. The content was a PG, but the shows WWF put on were PG. Raw's War was the first hour, and things weren't as crazy as the second hour, which was called Warzone. Together they were Raw, but WWF split them in half to make their ratings look stronger. Warzone even had an intro in the beginning. WWF would eventually call it Raw Zone from 2001 to 2011. The Warzone usually brought some of the bigger storylines and matches. WWF was mostly PG throughout 1998 until the Undertaker and Stone Cold Sacrifice segment. From there, Raw was TV-14. Just to mention, TV ratings weren't as clear-cut back then because they had just enforced them. Technically, though, WWF the entire year was PG. SmackDown was just there for its entire run, barring some episodes, and at this point, WWF had an unstoppable momentum and was flying at its highest. Some of the mid-card wrestlers were making 7 figures, ratings were peaking at 7.0s on a weekly basis at some points, and WWF in 1999 was the hottest the promotion was in the entire decade. This was a result of all the edginess and change from the PG style they knew in the past. It was most importantly Stone Cold, but that stuff played a huge part. On the other side, WWF was on a constant microscope throughout the years, from scantily clad women such as Sable to some insane storyline like the Ministry of Darkness. It was always something with the WWF, and in addition to their success, the one thing they couldn't avoid was controversy, and this in turn made it difficult to monetize the product as well as they do now. There's a certain stigma about wrestling, and in turn this was the Attitude Era, so you add to that as well, it's more of a problem. They still got some notable sponsors, but it wasn't as huge as now. It's also important to mention that WWF went public at this time, and that would affect a lot of things later on. Most of the things happening around this time period was because Vince had nobody to answer to. Now, they're stockholders. As years went by, WWF, now WWE, was still doing things the same way but with no result. There's a certain spark in the Attitude Era that they lacked. They thought throwing controversial storylines around was going to do something, but it didn't work, and with the impending departures of Stone Cold and The Rock, it left the door open for some new talent to emerge. WWE also didn't need to push themselves as they once did because there was no competition. WCW and ECW were gone, and the talent to lead the WWE into the new era was already in plain sight. They just didn't realize it. It was John Cena. John Cena had emerged as a hot talent from OVW with a lot of potential. He wasn't seen as the number one guy initially, but one of the new faces. Cena had to work very hard on himself in Escape Release by developing his rap character mostly based on his love for hip-hop and battle raps. This character only happened because Stephanie McMahon heard him on a bus. Otherwise, he was probably going to be released and go elsewhere. Cena had a lot of love for the crowd for his thug character that transitioned into a very charismatic rapper. The moment he turned face, he was destined for the very top, and it didn't take long for him to become the number one guy. He possessed all the qualities to be the face of the company, a role that's held by a select few throughout history. WWE lacked that face since Rock and Austin both left at nearly the same time. What was different about Cena was he had more of a willingness to do things as opposed to Stone Cold. He saw himself as a soldier of the company rather than just being the number one guy, which is something that a lot of the previous guys always thought about. They always wanted to protect their place because at the end of the day, they don't know if tomorrow's going to be the end or what. Hulk Hogan constantly talks about this in his interviews. Stone Cold obviously wanted to protect himself as well. Everyone wanted to protect himself. At the same time, WWE was becoming more and more family friendly. John Cena played a huge role in that, but the blood was happening less and less often, even before the Chris Benoit incident. You can notice that the shows weren't as violent as previously. It still happened, of course, but back in 2002 and 2003, every week someone would be bleeding like crazy and selling a beatdown from Triple H or Brock Lesnar. Then the Chris Benoit incident occurred. Another time where wrestling was observed closely, and 2007 was a year of tragedy. Many wrestlers passed away from injuries and problems they suffered in the industry.
Yeah, around this time, this is when a lot of people started turning off WWE. Mainly it was when Eddie died. When Eddie died, that's when a lot of people was like, yeah, I'm done with WWE, man. I don't even want to watch this shit no more. But when the Chris Benoit situation happened, it was like a change in the guard. It was like being a WWE fan, it was like damn near you had to be in the closet to be a WWE fan. Pause, no diddy. But you damn near had to be in the closet. You couldn't even come out and be like, yeah, I'm a WWE fan. You watch wrestling, grow up. Like, why are you watching that? You're such a fucking kid. Grow up. Grow up. Like, you're such a fucking dweeb. You're such a fucking loser. Grow up. And you hate that. Because this is something that you grew up with. And it's something that other people grew up with. But then they want to start acting all different and shit when the product starts becoming not what it used to be. And I understand. Some people grow up. Some people stop looking at shit a certain type of way. They start growing up. They start getting interest in other things. It's understandable. Like, I grew out of cartoons when a lot of people were still watching cartoons. Like, around this time, I wasn't even watching cartoons. I was watching, like, sports. I was watching ESPN, fucking HBO and Showtime more than I was watching fucking Nickelodeon. So, you know, it's understandable. Everybody grows out of everything. It's understandable. But, yeah, the WWE was really taking a hard hit, especially around the playgrounds. Like, just being a wrestling fan and people just be like, you know that's fake, right? You know that's fake. Like, you ain't gotta tell me that. I know that.
Industry and questions were raised. It seemed like that PG rating was always meant to happen anyways, but 2007 only brought it closer. The whole year was dominated by John Cena and saw the product in general becoming toned down as time went on. Hornswoggle even had a goofy storyline where he'd be running away from the coach, ran through a wall, and for the most part, WWE only had that TV-14 rating for their previous reputation. It was basically PG at this point, but it just didn't have the rating. Back to John Cena. The champ had become the WWE's name and face of the company, a role he took great pride in. Sometime after 2005, John Cena went from a street rapper with an edge to somebody who was now the superhero of all the children. Something that was very similar to Hulk Hogan. This was met with criticism and complaints from older fans because not only was Cena watered down, but he was forced to be in a role that not only took some of his best qualities, but also made him almost unstoppable. This was from the years of 2005 to 2007. Cena spoke about this in an interview and said, and I quote, WWE moved towards PG. They weren't quite PG yet, but they wanted to move in that direction. You see little kids wearing your stuff, and your stuff is pushing the boundaries, and then I was like, you know what? I want to stop doing this. It was my choice. When you look back on it, I noticed that WWE is probably going PG anyways. You look at the old episodes and stuff, because their number one guy was everything that The Rock and Austin were. As a kid, I loved John Cena, still do, one of my favorites of all time, but even I turned on him at one point. I'll get into that later. Okay, 2008, a very notable year for professional wrestling in WWE. WWE went HD, which meant that the presentation changed significantly, but blood was still around and looked very weird to see in HD. Then from out of nowhere, WWE said they were going PG. This came with a lot of confusion and disappointment. For one, WWE quickly took away blood when Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels had that match at the Bash, which saw HBK bleed like nobody else had in years. The PG rating changed a lot of things. The women used to have those random competitions every couple of months. Now they had to focus more on the in-ring stuff. WWE didn't do a great job with that, but it was certainly better than the time period when Lita and Trish Stratus left. That time period felt so lost, especially before they pushed Melina. 2008 didn't feel much of a huge change with this product. John Cena had already been positioned as a superhero, but that would continue to show more in 2009. Wrestlers had to learn about blood the hard way, and after Batista and Chris Jericho took the risk of bleeding during their main event match, the boss fined Batista $100,000. He took $100K out of his pocket. Here's what he had to say in an interview, and I quote, "I was just heartbroken. Vince McMahon sucked the life out of me that day. I think that's the day that I knew things were never going to be the same." And they were. That was actually a day where things changed. Batista's relationship with Vince actually changed that day as well. Batista really liked the TV-14 thing. It gave him more of an edge. He already had an edge in the PG era, but it really helps a lot, you know, enhances your character more. As evident by nowadays, Batista takes great pride in his character, and when WWE went PG and he left, he felt like he needed to. He didn't want to stay around. John Cena's moves, the FU and the STFU, were a common staple of his moveset and represented the edginess of his old self. WWE renamed them when they went PG. I don't even remember this, but his FU was actually called the Throwback for a short time, and it was actually his call, which some fans guessed. Here's what he had to say in an interview, and I quote, "It was totally my call. It's actually attitude adjustment. I realize that our audience has changed now, and when I look out past the ring now, I see so many children. Originally, the FU was a pun in response to Brock Lesnar's move. He used to wrestle in the WWE. I never really called it that. It's something I said once, and the announcers picked it up. I know that kids are watching my every move, and there are a lot of parents know their kids look up to me, and I know a lot of people watch our program with closed eyes, and I kind of live by the motto hustle, loyalty, and respect. If someone is out of line, I think instead of giving them an FU, it's better to give them an attitude adjustment." I remember that name change. It just happened like from out of nowhere. I don't even remember exactly when it happened, but a lot of...
This will always be the FU. I'm never call it the attitude adjustment. Fuck an attitude adjustment. It's the FU forever, nigga. FU, STFU, it's always gonna be the FU. Fuck out of here.
People. If you guys remember, back then, a lot of people hated that. I wasn't even on the boards or the forums or reading rumors, just on YouTube. They absolutely despised the fact that John Cena's two most important moves were renamed and were made more kid-friendly. Obviously, we got used to it now, but the attitude adjustment back then was a stupid-ass name. It was so bad. I don't think it's so bad nowadays, but like back then, when I look back, a lot of people hated it. WWE was becoming too kid-friendly. The attitude adjustment name was brought on about a month later in February of 2009. John Cena's crowd reaction at the time was almost entirely positive, which caught me off guard when I watched the Raw segment from the middle of 2009, but the cheers were very high-pitched, so that tells you all you need to know. An important reason for why WWE went PG was because Linda McMahon was running for Senate. And you guys know how in politics things go. You know, you gotta have a good image and stuff because people use it against you and whatnot. WWE being the product that's violent and embarrassing, disrespects women, isn't gonna help the election. She lost twice anyways. Not to mention they were constantly promoting this thing called stand up for WWE. Why am I gonna stand up for WWE when I should stand up for myself? What the hell? What helped WWE here with the move to PG was sponsors. The sponsors were much more famous and better than previously. They had a lot of Sacker 2 sponsors in the 2000s. That changed in a year after WWE went PG. They got Mattel, a big toy company to make products for the WWE. This followed with more prominent companies such as Fruity Pebbles. Kmart was one of the bigger sponsors in this era, and they released some John Cena shoes. Those shoes are the entire reason why he never turned heel. So if you saw a kid back then, just know those kids are the reason why John Cena never turned heel. I'm joking. It took a while, but by 2015, WWE finally got that Coca-Cola sponsor, 7 years after the move to PG, and it's basically the pinnacle of sponsorships. At least for what they wanted, you know, like they always wanted to aim for Coca-Cola, and they finally got it. Nowadays, the ring is filled with sponsors and the big events, and seeing as they're under TKO, I expect a lot more and more sponsorships, especially because now they started putting them on the mat. Prime is already infiltrating the mat, and I wonder what's next. With that said, the product early on in 2009 had a lot of adjustments to make, and I'm not talking about attitude. Chair shots were still a thing to the face, and Jeff Hardy back then used to lay those shots in like the wrestler owed him money. In-ring, not much changed, but the stories were more simple, I'd say. Randy Orton certainly made the most out of the PG rating, not letting it affect him, and he even RKO'd Stephanie at one point. Words took a downgrade, and again, you don't need profanity to get your point across, especially if you're a great promo, but early on there was a point to make where you can't say ass and other things. WWE even had John Cena acting like a thug, destroying some other guy's property, saying JBL's poopy, when all they had to do was call him trash or something else. Like, what the hell? In Miss the Fruity Pebble era, John Cena even made an apology and got fined for saying the word ass. This was 1 month before The Rock's return, which loosened things up and gave the wrestlers a little more freedom. It may have been for storyline purposes though, just want to mention it, but then again, that word wasn't heard much after WWE went PG. With that said, WWE's PG era changed many things. John Cena in many ways is the face of a faceless entity. He represents the transition from the Attitude Era and ruthless aggression to a family-friendly product the likes fans haven't seen in decades, and his booking went into overdrive right when they went PG. Cena was already in some ways a Superman-like character, but that truly increased and became symbolized more with the Fruity Pebble colors. If you're wondering why John Cena is a major part of this video, it's because the Cena of 2008 to 2011 is the PG era in a nutshell. It would not be a proper video if he wasn't a focal point of this video. In many ways, a lot of people see the PG rating as the reason why WWE was terrible. I remember this ever since I was a kid and watched old videos on YouTube. They'd always comment about how it was better back then and that PG ruined WWE, when it's always the booking that's been the problem, even in their favorite eras. And I think a lot of people are blinded by nostalgia that makes them overlook problems even in their favorite time periods, but I will say this, there's validity in what people say, because WWE going PG stifled them creatively. And it's not because exactly of the rating, it's because what it allowed them to do. PG allowed for them to become complacent and rely on the endless Super Cena machine to go on and on and on. And that's where people are right. I remember his big title matches and feuds with the likes of Triple H, Edge, Shawn Michaels, and so on. But even I could acknowledge they did too much. He was in the title picture too much and lacked any evolution in his character, even though Rock and Stone Cold evolved as time went on. Cena of 2006 was the same as 2010. By the time he did change a bit in 2011, fans were just tired of him being around at the top. Not to mention how he was constantly pushed as an underdog despite being the dynasty. Imagine the 2017 Warriors, 2011 Barcelona, or the 2005 New England Patriots being seen as the underdog. Exact same thing. To many people, the NBA got boring during the Warriors' dynasty, and that sport's real, because even though he wasn't around the title, it was only a matter of time before he was. I do think it caused people to overlook his talent, opponent. You know, there's very few on the mic at the time that were better. And there's a case for him being the 2010 Wrestler of the Year for WWE, despite it being the prime version of Super Cena. You know, orange and purple. He'd get knocked down. The second part of the match might get boring, but we all know how it would end. Even then, I personally think there's a case for him to be Wrestler of the Year. I look at the year-end rankings from that year. You know, orange John Cena, purple John Cena. Many people have him as number 1. 2010's a funny year for me. I used to see a lot of things on the internet. I used to hate PG WWE. I didn't hate the product, just that it's PG, because I saw everyone did. You know, like, I liked watching WWE, but I didn't like the fact that it was PG. I watched Raw and SmackDown every week, even ECW and NXT sometimes when it started airing, and I already knew the stigma John Cena had. Sometime before the summer, I just randomly turned on him because there was nothing cool about him. Randy Orton, who had just turned face, had more appeal and interest to me. His character felt fresh and different as opposed to Cena, who was the same. I was always hoping that rapper Cena would return, and in hindsight, I'm glad that didn't happen, but it was mostly because his character had an edge back then. Then I watched The Marine again and realized I couldn't really hate him. Still like Randy Orton more at the time though, and if Cena evolved in that time, things would have been different. But again, even if he did change a bit, I don't think fans are going to accept it unless he turned heel. So in a nutshell, PG and John Cena's push coinciding was a recipe for disaster, because there's a lot of great talent around, but because they didn't have the track record or trust that John Cena had, and in some cases it was right, they completely relied on him. Even after 2011, there was still a worry about Cena taking over the main event scene. It's just his portrayal changed significantly after CM Punk called him out. He was now the guy to beat in a dynasty that was destined to go on for years to come. Personally, I liked him, but mostly preferred others to be champion. I was a big CM Punk and Daniel Bryan fanboy in 2012. I think for CM Punk, it was simply down to him being a complete package, but with a certain groundness to his character. You know, he was very grounded. WWE didn't see that for a long time before, so once he was unlocked in 2011, it made you see him differently. Obviously, get why WWE did push John Cena at the top. You know, it's very understandable. At the end of the day, it is a company. They're gonna make money. It doesn't really matter to them if creative isn't hitting, as long as the money is coming in. I obviously understand it, but creatively, there's a reason why many people do not revisit this era of WWE a lot. It's because it was very hollow at times and very dry. So yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of WWE going PG? Please comment down below. That's the first video. Make sure you hit the Stone Cold Stunner on the like button and perhaps the attitude adjustment on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.
Alrighty. That's just gonna about do it for this one, man. Most definitely, man. Most definitely. Like I said, I don't think, like I said, after late 2009, like I said, when they started the celebrity guest Raw GM gimmick, that's when WWE just started shifting downward and downward and downward. And then I want to say around the time The Rock came back, it actually got a little bit more interesting because we haven't seen The Rock in so long. So I was interested. I was very interested in wrestling until I saw that WrestleMania. Then I kind of like disappeared for a little bit. Then I came back during the summertime, around the time Cena had won the Money in the Bank and cashed it in at Raw 1000. And then I was kind of like just stuck around because I wanted to see The Rock and Cena storyline play out, because there was long-term booking. So I wanted to see how they would write it out, because you know that was the most interesting thing around the time, was Rock and Cena was gonna face each other at the next WrestleMania. So just seeing that alone, just being there for that. And then I want to say after that happened, kind of started drifting away from WWE again. The product just wasn't hitting for me. Like I said, I'm not a CM Punk guy, so CM Punk wasn't hitting for me either. So if y'all was into CM Punk around that time, I wasn't. The character wasn't doing nothing for me. It was just another. I looked at CM Punk as just another Stone Cold gimmick. To be honest with you, I just saw it as another anti-establishment Stone Cold gimmick. And I just didn't fall for the hype. That's the main reason why. I just didn't see what y'all would see in CM Punk. But that's just me though. Didn't really come back until I want to say around late 2012. I want to say SummerSlam-ish. Around SummerSlam-ish of 2012, that's when I came back and I just started watching the product again. The Ryback character, I liked the Ryback character for a little bit. Then the Shield happened, and then the Wyatt family came out of nowhere. And 2013 was just like it felt like a new beginning in 2013. So I really was invested in the WWE around that time. All the way up until I want to say like late 2016, around like December 2016. Yeah, I was done with WWE. I was like, whatever. And I just went on with my life. And I didn't come back to WWE till the pandemic, because there was nothing to do and there was nowhere to go. So yeah, that's my experience with WWE so far. But yeah, that's just gonna about do it for this one. I'll see you on the next video. Till then, peace out.